Who the hell leaves a crate in the middle of the highway? Do they want someone dead? Officer Reed barked, slamming the brakes so hard his coffee splashed onto the dashboard. The patrol cruiser swerved to a stop just a few feet from the huge, warped metal cage sitting awkwardly between the lanes, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the steaming asphalt. He flung the door open, ignoring the horns from the few passing cars, and jogged toward the crate, his partner, Officer Marla Chen, trailing behind him with her hand instinctively on her belt. From a distance, it looked like trash, twisted wires, plastic shards, something stained, dark, and sticky. But as they got closer, the stench hit first, coppery, sharp, unmistakably blood. And then they heard the sound, low, rattling, almost like a growl, except it wasn't threatening, it was protective. Inside the cage was a German shepherd puppy, thin as bone, fur matted with filth and blood, nose pressed to a crumpled cloth bundle nestled beneath his trembling body. His front paws had blood on them. A long gash across his right shoulder glistened fresh, but he wasn't trying to escape. He wasn't crying out. He was guarding. Frozen in a defiant crouch, the tiny pup glared up at them, eyes glassy but fierce. Reed knelt slowly, trying not to spook the pup. "Easy, boy. We're not here to hurt you." Marla stepped closer and peered into the crate. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Reed. That's not just a blanket under him," she whispered. Reed leaned in, and his breath caught, wrapped. In layers of rags, tucked almost invisibly under the puppy's belly, was a newborn baby, barely days old, silent, pale, but breathing. The infant's skin was blotchy, mouth slack, a bottle cap of dried milk stuck to the corner of his lips. There was no note, no name, nothing, only the puppy. For the next few seconds, neither officer spoke. The wind carried the distant rumble of tires. Birds chirped somewhere above the highway embankment, but all Reed could hear was his own pulse, thundering in his ears. They called in backup, an ambulance and animal rescue, but neither Reed nor Marla dared to touch the crate until help arrived. The puppy wouldn't let them. Every time a hand reached too close, he bared his teeth, not with aggression, but desperation. He stayed like a living shield over the infant, even when he could barely keep his head upright. At the hospital, the story hit like wildfire. A newborn abandoned. A puppy refusing to leave his side. The crate left in the middle of nowhere, with no clue who did it, or why. Dr. Leland, the pediatrician on duty that night, confirmed what they feared. If that puppy hadn't stayed on top of him through the night, he would have frozen to death. The child, barely 6 pounds, had hypothermia, dehydration, and signs of neglect, but he was alive. And so was the puppy, though the vet said the dog's survival was a miracle in itself. Infection had already started in his wound. He hadn't eaten in days. His muscles twitched from exhaustion, yet he hadn't moved an inch from the baby's side. News stations ran the story with headlines like, "Hero Pup Saves Abandoned Baby," and "Fur and Flesh, the Bond That Saved a Life." But while the world praised the little shepherd, no one could answer the deeper questions. Who left them there? Why? And what on earth had driven a half-dead puppy to risk everything for a baby? Not his own? Officer Reed couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, long after the paperwork was filed and the puppy was stabilized at the shelter, he returned to the empty stretch of highway alone. The crate was gone, but he stood at the spot, headlights dimmed, listening to the silence. He didn't believe in coincidences, not like this. And deep down, something told him this wasn't over. Whoever left them there had meant for them to disappear. But the dog, he had refused. The truth behind it all was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. The emergency room was unusually silent when Officer Reed stepped in carrying the bundle. A nurse took the baby from his arms, but not without pausing to look at the bloodied little German shepherd pup clinging to the blanket. The dog growled, low, not in anger, but in warning, refusing to let the child go. It took a vet tech named Noel, whispering gently and wrapping the puppy in a soft towel, to finally lift him away. The baby, now identified as a male, was immediately taken into neonatal care. His vitals were weak, his body temperature dangerously low, but he was stable. The doctors worked quickly. IV fluids, warming pads, blood tests. Meanwhile, Noelle took the puppy, whom she quietly named Bolt, to the animal trauma center next door. His shoulder wound had become infected, and he was severely malnourished. Yet he whimpered and thrashed whenever he was taken too far from the baby's room. He didn't want to be apart. Even sedated, His small body kept inching toward the hallway where the child was being cared for. By morning, news vans swarmed the hospital gates. Reporters tried to piece together the unbelievable tale. A newborn found abandoned on the side of a highway in the dead of night, guarded by a puppy who'd almost died trying to protect him. Headlines praised the dog's loyalty, but inside the hospital, the mystery only deepened. There were no missing persons reports matching the baby, no hospital records, no security footage from any nearby exits or neighborhoods that showed someone dropping a crate. It was like the child and the dog had appeared out of thin air. Social services arrived, asking questions, drawing up custody paperwork for the baby, but nobody dared to name him yet. And that unsettled Reed. Back at the precinct, Reed sat hunched over his desk, staring at the grainy dash cam footage from his A-Day patrol car. He kept playing the moment the crate first came into view. Frame by frame, there had to be something he missed. A clue, a shadow, a car speeding off just before they arrived. But there was nothing, only the headlights revealing that bent metal box in the middle of nowhere. He rubbed his temples. Nobody just abandons a baby and a dog together like that, unless they were meant to disappear. His partner, Marla, tapped on the door. "You might want to hear this," she said, handing him her phone. On the screen was an interview clip from a shelter volunteer named Kayla. She'd been quietly reviewing intake records and recognized the dog. "That pup came in with his mother months ago," Kayla said on the screen. "The mom was a stray, came in pregnant, gave birth to a litter, but she got adopted almost immediately. The pups were left. This one, he escaped, climbed the fence, vanished. We put out flyers, but nothing ever came of it." Reed froze. "You're telling me this dog's been missing for weeks?" Marla nodded. "And now he shows up guarding a baby?" "There's more. Kayla said the family who adopted the mother? They were connected to a foster program for underage mothers." Reed didn't speak for a moment. Then he stood. "Get me an address." Back at the hospital, Bolt hadn't moved from his spot on the floor outside the NICU. They'd tried kennels, beds, even treats, but every time he returned to the same corner, staring through the glass like a soldier on watch. The nurses started, calling him the Guardian. Babies cried around him. Machines beeped. Doors swung open and shut, but he didn't react. His eyes stayed fixed on that little incubator, as if his entire world was inside it. The baby, whom the staff quietly began calling Jude, had started to gain strength. His color returned. He cried when touched, which the doctors took as a good sign. But it wasn't until Bolt was brought into the room, on a leash, wrapped in gauze, that he stopped crying completely. The moment the pup was near, Jude calmed. Every monitor in the room registered it. His breathing slowed. Heart rate evened out. Nurses exchanged stunned glances. "They've bonded," one whispered. "It's like they already know each other." Reed finally got the address he needed. The home was on the outskirts of town, small, plain, barely lived in. A woman answered the door, her eyes red and swollen. She recognized the photo of the dog instantly. "That's Bubbles," she said, her voice cracking. "My daughter named him that when she volunteered at the shelter." The girl, 16, gone missing 2 weeks earlier, had been pregnant. She hadn't told anyone until the very end. By the time her mother had found out, she had already run. Her dog had followed her. The authorities had searched, but there'd been no trace. And then, last night, a stranger's voice had left a message on the house's landline. No name, just a location. "There's a crate. You'll want to send someone." Reed's chest tightened. He looked at the woman. "You think she's still out there?" She wiped her cheek. "I don't know, but that baby, if it's hers," she gave him a protector, the only one she trusted. As night fell over the hospital once more, Reed stood just outside the NICU. Inside, Jude slept, and Bolt rested beneath his crib. The baby's tiny hand hung over the edge, fingers curled in soft dreams. The dog didn't sleep. His ears twitched. His eyes remained open, watching, waiting. And Reed knew, whatever had happened that night on the highway, whatever pain had driven that girl to disappear, this puppy had made a decision to guard life, to give warmth, to stay behind when no one else would. But why, and more urgently, would the mother return? The answer, he feared, would break more hearts than it healed. Officer Reed stood in the hallway outside the neonatal unit, staring through the glass. Bolt hadn't moved from the crib's side for hours. The pup lay still, ears twitching at every sound, but his eyes stayed fixed on the baby. It was like he knew what was at stake. Reed had seen plenty of loyalty in his years, especially from dogs, but this was different. It wasn't just protection. It was devotion, deep and personal, like the dog had made a vow. Inside, Jude's condition had stabilized, but the doctors remained cautious. Malnourishment, exposure, and potential infection were all threats. Still, they couldn't deny the boy's response to Bolt. Every time they tried to move the dog away, Jude's vitals spiked. When the pup returned, everything normalized. It was impossible to ignore. Nurses whispered it like a secret blessing. This wasn't coincidence. It was connection. Meanwhile, the investigation into the call deepened. Reed traced the number back to a prepaid burner phone. No name, no GPS hits, nothing traceable. But the location they'd been given was too specific, too intentional. Whoever made that call wanted Jude found, but they also wanted to vanish. Later that afternoon, Marla returned with a breakthrough. She handed Reed a faded photograph recovered from the shelter archives. It was from a community event nearly a year ago. A teen girl with long brown braids holding a pregnant German shepherd in her lap. Beside her, a cardboard sign, "Adopt, don't shop." And at her feet, the same puppy from the crate, Bolt. She used to volunteer at the shelter. Her name's Mia Torres. Went missing almost 3 weeks ago. Her family filed a report, but she's been off the grid since. Reed clenched the photo in his hand. That's our girl. He visited Mia's mother again. The woman sobbed when she saw the photo. She confirmed the dog, the girl, even the pregnancy. She had begged Mia to come home when she'd found out. They'd fought. Mia had stormed out and never returned. She loved that dog more than anything, her mother whispered. Said he was the only soul who never judged her. The pieces were falling into place. Mia had given birth in secret, then somehow managed to leave the baby and bolt. Somewhere she believed they'd be found. But the question haunted Reed. Why didn't she come herself? Why disappear after going through all that? Back at the hospital, Bolt began to refuse food. He paced more, growled when nurses entered, even softly. Noel, the vet tech who'd been tending to him, knew something was off. His eyes weren't just watchful anymore. They were restless, nervous, as if he sensed something no one else did. Reed returned to the scene, the stretch of highway where they'd found the crate. This time, he walked deeper into the woods behind the ditch, boots crunching over dry leaves and brittle twigs. And then he saw it. A small, half-collapsed tent camouflaged by dead branches and a discarded sleeping bag barely tucked inside. It had rained recently, and most of it was soaked, but inside he found signs, a baby sock, a used bottle, an empty water jug, and blood. Not much, but enough. He radioed it in. Forensics would comb the area, but Reed didn't wait. He looked around, scanned the tree line, and listened. No birdsong, no animal rustle, just stillness. And in his gut, he felt it. She was out there, hurt, hiding, watching. Back at the hospital, Jude began to cry, loud, heart-wrenching sobs that echoed through the ward. Bolt bolted upright, ears stiff, and then something incredible happened. He howled, not a bark, a long, aching sound that filled the corridor like a siren. And then he ran, out of the room, down the hallway, dragging his bandaged leg behind him, ignoring every shout from the nurses. Noel chased him as far as the stairwell, but Bolt was gone before she reached the bottom. Reed got the call while, still in the woods. The dog took off, Marla said breathlessly. He's heading in your direction. 20 minutes later, Reed spotted the blur of movement. Small, determined, bounding through mud and brush. Bolt, and right behind him, barely standing, was a girl, Mia. She collapsed before she reached him. Reed caught her as she fell, his arms supporting her limp frame. Her lips were cracked, skin pale and smeared with dirt and dried blood. She clutched something in her pocket, a small ribbon. Pink. She's safe, she whispered, voice barely audible. She? Reed asked. My daughter, Mia breathed. I thought she didn't make it. She stopped breathing, and I couldn't. Get help. I was going to leave a note, but there wasn't time. So I gave her to Bolt. Reed didn't correct her yet. He just squeezed her hand. You saved her. He did. You both did. She passed out. Helicopters came. Medics rushed in. Bolt didn't let anyone near Mia without his approval. He barked at paramedics, growled at the flight team. But when she was finally loaded into the stretcher, he climbed up beside her and lay across her chest like a lifeline refusing to break. Reed watched the helicopter lift off, heart thudding in his chest. It wasn't over yet. But something inside him shifted. Because for all the cruelty of what had happened, for all the darkness Mia had been through, love had still found a way to roar louder than silence. And Bolt, he had never been just a puppy left in a crate. He had been a messenger, a guardian, and the only reason a life had been saved. The chopper blades stirred the dust in frantic swirls as Mia was lifted into the sky, her body fragile and limp beneath the straps. Bolt didn't take his eyes off her even once. Lying beside her, half his face pressed to her ribs, he remained motionless, as if by staying still he could somehow keep her spirit from slipping away again. Officer Reed stood there long after the helicopter disappeared from sight. The forest, now silent, but for the rustle of the wind. His radio crackled in his vest, but he didn't answer. Not yet. Something deeper than duty kept him rooted, something that felt uncomfortably close to awe. He retraced Bolt's path back through the woods, past the soaked tent and the blood-stained leaves, to the edge of the highway where the crate had first been found. It felt like a lifetime ago. Back then, Jude had just been the infant, and Bolt was the stray. Labels that had since been blown apart by the raw emotion of what had unfolded. Reed knelt beside the now empty crate. A piece of chewed cloth remained inside. A baby's hat, pink, soft, barely larger than a hand. He held it gently, thumb running along the stitching. Back at the hospital, the news spread fast. The girl had been found. Her story, while still unraveling, was already shocking everyone. Noelle sat beside Jude's crib, her palm resting softly on his belly. The baby had calmed again the moment Bolt returned, even if just briefly. She watched the rise and fall of his tiny chest and thought about what Mia must have gone through. Pregnant, hiding in the woods, bleeding, starving, and yet she'd had the strength to trust her dog with the most precious thing she had. No one taught that kind of courage. Later that evening, Dr. Lin called Reed back with urgent news. Mia had survived the flight and was now stable, though weak, dehydrated, and barely coherent. Still in her fragile state, she'd asked for two things, her baby and her dog. Reed stood at the foot of her hospital bed hours later. Mia's eyes fluttered open, glassy but alert. Her cheeks were sunken, lips cracked, but her voice, though rasped, came out with surprising strength. Did she make it? Reed nodded, then gently laid the baby's pink hat in her hand. She's alive, strong. She held on for you. Bolt, too. Mia's eyes welled instantly. She pressed the hat to her face, breathing in the fading scent. I thought she died, she whispered. She wasn't breathing. I gave up. I told Bolt to leave, to take her somewhere safe. I didn't think he would really understand. Reed sat beside her. He didn't just understand. He guarded her with his life. Sat beside her for hours in a box, in the cold on a highway, until we found them. He barked until his throat bled. Mia's tears spilled silently. They're both here now, and they're waiting for you to come home. That night, something rare happened in the hospital's main hallway. News of the reunion had spread among staff, but no one expected what followed. Nurse after nurse lined up along the corridor as Mia, frail and weak, with an IV dangling from her arm, was wheeled out of recovery. Bolt walked beside her, tail low but wagging faintly, his steps carefully matched to hers. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was Jude. Her eyes were still red, her body still shaking, but the strength she radiated was unmistakable. The story made headlines by morning. Hero dog rescues baby on highway, one title read. Others went deeper. Teen mother disappears after birth. Found alive after dog leads. Police to crate. Every reporter in the city wanted an interview, but Mia didn't speak to the press, not right away. Instead, she stayed in a small recovery room with Bolt and Jude, cradling one in her arms while the other slept at her feet. Reed visited her one last time before discharge. He handed her a folder. Inside were papers for custody support, state aid, trauma counseling, and veterinary care sponsorship for Bolt. She opened it quietly, flipping through the documents with wide eyes. I know it's a lot, he said, but it's all real. You're not alone anymore. She looked up at him, voice still hoarse. They would have died without him. Reed nodded slowly. Maybe, or maybe you would have died without them. She didn't respond, just reached down and rested her hand gently on Bolt's head. He nudged her wrist with his nose. When they finally left the hospital, Mia didn't have much. A borrowed jacket, a baby she was still learning how to hold, a scar on her leg where the infection had almost taken root. But she had Bolt, and she had a second chance. One built not on luck, but on love, sacrifice, and the fierce loyalty of a dog who refused to abandon what mattered most. And Bolt? He didn't wear medals. He wasn't trained to save lives. He'd just been born into a world that threw him away. But somehow, that little crate on the highway had held the heart of a warrior, and the baby he guarded was the proof. The wind rustled the leaves gently as the sun crept through the trees, casting a golden light on the porch steps where Mia now sat, her legs folded beneath her and her arms wrapped around her daughter. It had been 3 weeks since the hospital discharge, and the world outside their little cottage still felt overwhelming at times. But here, in this quiet patch of rural calm offered by the foster program, life had taken on a strange, almost sacred peace. She wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Jude cooed softly in her lap, eyes bright, hands gripping the edge of her mother's shirt. Her tiny fingers had grown stronger each day, grasping with curiosity, tugging with trust. And at Mia's feet lay Bolt, ever watchful, his ears flicking at the sound of birds and far-off tractors but never straying far, his side pressed gently against Mia's leg, a silent reassurance she had come to depend on more than she ever admitted aloud. Inside, the cottage was modest. 2 rooms, a creaky floor, second-hand furniture, but it held warmth that no mansion could replicate, the kind of warmth born not of wealth, but of healing. Reed had visited twice already, each time bringing groceries and news of the vet clinic that had offered Bolt free lifetime care. The first time he brought a collar, not just any collar, a hand-stitched leather one with a name tag, Bolt, Hero. Mia hadn't cried in front of him then, but the moment he left, she had buried her face into Bolt's fur and let the tears fall freely. This morning was different, though. This morning brought visitors. The knock came just as Mia was preparing Jude's bottle. She opened the door cautiously, surprised to see a well-dressed couple standing on the path. The woman had soft eyes, and the man held his hat in both hands. Behind them stood Officer Reed, his familiar presence immediately easing Mia's tension. "These are the Merricks," he said gently. "They're from the foundation that runs the program you're in. They'd like to talk." Mia invited them in, brushing her hair behind her ear, self-conscious of the old t-shirt she wore and the clutter of baby things scattered around. But the Merricks didn't seem to notice. Their focus was entirely on her, on the baby, and on Bolt. "We read your file," Mr. Merrick said after a while, his voice low but firm. "And frankly, it moved us. But the video footage, that's what changed everything." Mia blinked. "Footage?" Reed nodded. "The highway camera. It captured Bolt dragging the crate off the road, shielding it from the passing trucks. And then the dash cam, when you collapsed and he ran back to you, then returned to the crate. It's gone viral." Her hand flew to her mouth. "People saw that?" Mrs. Merrick smiled softly. "Yes, and instead of disgust or judgment, people responded with donations, support, love. They didn't see a girl who ran away. They saw a mother who fought like hell to protect her child, with the help of a dog who never gave up on either of you." Mia couldn't speak. Her throat tightened, and her hands trembled as she pulled Jude closer. "I don't want to be a story. I just want to be okay." Mrs. Merrick nodded. "That's why we're here. We'd like to offer you something. Full scholarship to finish school, paid housing, a job placement program when you're ready. And for Bolt, well, we've already partnered with a training center. If you agree, he can become a certified emotional support dog." "He's already got the heart for it." Mia's vision blurred. She reached down to stroke Bolt's head. He looked up, eyes calm, as if he understood every word. "You don't have to decide today," Mr. Merrick added gently. "But we wanted you to know. You're not forgotten, and neither is your courage." Later that evening, when the house had quieted again, Mia sat under the stars with Bolt at her side and Jude sleeping against her chest. She whispered softly, the way only a mother does when she knows her child can't yet understand the words, but needs to feel them anyway. "We're going to be okay, I promise," the wind answered with a soft sigh through the trees. And Bolt, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, stood and pressed his head against her arm before lying beside her again, guard once more. The road that brought them here had been cruel. A crate on the highway, a baby wrapped in a blanket, a desperate mother and a dog no one wanted. But now, it was something sacred, a beginning, a second chance, written in paw prints and lullabies. And if you ever drove past that stretch of highway and saw the small wooden sign someone had nailed, "To the nearest post, you'd find the words carved carefully into the grain. Sometimes heroes come with 4 legs and a bark.